What's up guys, welcome to another VFX tutorial. And today we're doing some flash slow-mo effects. And before we start, I just want to say that everything in this effect will be made inside After Effects, including the slow-mo sparks. What you can see from my footage is that I've actually used real light in the scene. So I recommend doing that. Any light helps. You can even use your phone or something. Using real light makes your effects look 10 times better. So the very first thing I want to do is right here when I start moving, I want to add some shock waves going around, because this whole thing is in super slow motion, so it just creates some cool effect. So I'm just going to start by creating a new adjustment layer and just cutting it where I want the shock waves to start, so somewhere here. And then maybe last like that long. You just have to kind of see what looks right. Then let's take the pen tool and draw a wavy shape thingy somewhere near your actor's body. Let's make it really thin, because this is the starting point. Then let's go to the mask settings and put the keyframes under the mask path so we can animate the masks. Then in the last frame, let's move the whole thing way out of screen and expand it. So now we have this wave that's moving outwards. Let's put some feathering to it. Let's put it to 20. Then let's add a turbulent displacement. And let's tweak some settings here. The size should be about 50 and amount. The amount, we're gonna actually animate that, so let's go to the first frame, hit keyframes on the amount, and let's put it to 12. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks pretty much how I want. So let's go to the last frame and put it to 5. So it just kind of fades away a little bit. And that looks pretty much exactly how I want. I do want to increase the feathering a little bit. I'm gonna put it to 30. It's a bit too harsh. And now I think it looks pretty good. And I'm just gonna repeat that step to the other side, going to the other direction. So now as you can see, I have two waves going around, some displacement. You don't really see a separate wave, you just see some displacement, so I think it looks cool. So the next thing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add RGB split, basically split the color channels right here when the light goes on. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press Ctrl-Shift-D to kind of split the clip, and this is the footage we're gonna split. So there's a really cool way to do that right inside After Effects without plugins. So first of all, let's change the blending mode to add. Then let's go to Effect, Channel, and add Arithmetic. And then just max out the blue value. And remember to change the operator to max. It should look like this. Then let's duplicate this with Ctrl-D, and in the top layer let's max out the green instead of blue. And then same thing one more time, and this time max out the red value. And now you can see we have all the channels in there, so it just looks like the normal clip. But we actually have the clip in 3 separate channels, and now we can offset them to create that cool split effect. So let's just go to transform in the top layer, type 956 to the position, and now one channel is separated. Now we want to change the bottom one too to the opposite direction, so let's type 964, and now we got this really cool rainbowy effect going on right when the light goes on. Now this next step is optional, but I'm gonna do it because I want the actor to be a bit separated from I don't want it to have this rainbowy effect. So what I'm gonna do is gonna take one of these layers, change the blending mode to normal, and remove the arithmetic. So now it's just a normal layer. Then I'm gonna do a rough rotoscope around me. I mean a really rough, just like something like that, and then just animate it with mask path. Now after the rotoscope, you can see that it really is just a rough mask. I didn't do it in nearly every frame, as you can see. Now remember to add some feathering to this too, so let's put it to 50. And before we move on to the lightning, I'm gonna pre-compose this as a one footage layer, because there's nothing gonna be between them anymore. So just to get them to take less space in the comp, I'm gonna name it footage. So now we're gonna move on to the actual lightning. And there's gonna be basically two types of lightning that we're gonna be making. There's some of that smaller, more complex, weird looking lightning, and then there's some bigger lightning bolts, and we have our separate ways to make them. And I want to start with the smaller lightning thingies. And the way we're gonna do that is with shape layers. So let's just start with adding a shape layer. Let's see where we want this lightning to start. I want this to start somewhere before this bright light, but also end after that a little bit. So let's just see, I don't want it too much, just a couple of frames before the light. Something like that. Now it starts a little bit before the light. So now let's make the actual lightning thingy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna draw a lightning thingy coming out of behind me, somewhere like there. So let's just make it, let's start drawing a mask coming out. We can make it really curvy. Something like this. So we have a line. To change the settings, just go to Contents and Shape and Stroke. So here you have all the color settings. Now I recommend having the stroke width to something like 0.5 like I have, or 1 if you want. You can change the size in all of the lightning layers. And the color in white. So now let's add some movement to the shape. So let's go to the path settings and put keyframes on. And then in the first frame, let's have it there in our actor. Then let's go to the last frame, then attach it back, and then let's add some movement to this whole other side too. So I'm just gonna twist it around a bit, put that down, lift this area, and then maybe pull this in, just like that. Now we get some interesting movement going on. And now in the middle of the whole thing, you may have to adjust the end, but as you can see, in the beginning it's moving way too fast. So we would just adjust the tip. Now this part has a lot of adjusting and little tweaking. So now I think I've animated it quite well. It has some cool movement, and it's right there. And now obviously, as you can see, it doesn't look like lightning. It just looks like some ugly line. So now we're gonna actually make it look cool. So first, let's go to Distort and add a Turbulent Displacement. Good old Turbulent Displacement. And in this first one, we want to add some small detail. So let's put the size to 4 and mode to bulge. Now we have this really small detail going on. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna animate it flowing outwards. So let's just select the Turbulent Displacement and select this thingy right there. As you can see, there's some cool stuff happening. And put the keyframes on in the offset. And then let's go to the last frame and move it outwards. Not too much, it's gonna look too fast otherwise. Let's see how that looks. And I think that looks pretty cool. We have some flow in there. we could even increase the amount to 80. Now it's really weird. Yeah, that's too much. I'm gonna put it to 55. Then let's add a second turbulent displacement. And this time let's put the size to like 20. With this one we're gonna get rid of that line look. Now the mode, you can always pick what you want. Pretty much the same twist and turbulent, but you can just see what looks good. I think the twist one looks pretty good in this one. To add even more movement, let's hit the stopwatch in evolution and then increase it in the last frame. So now you have even more movement in there. So let's start adding some glow. Let's go to stylize and add a glow. Now the first glow, you want it to be really small, like barely bigger than the line. Something like 5 or 6 usually looks right. I'm gonna put it to 6. Then let's just duplicate it with Ctrl D. And now let's increase it to something like 20. And then a third one. Let's increase this one to like 40. Now also, as you can see, because of this turbulent displacement, the second one that we added, it kind of messes up the endpoint. So you can't help it, you just have to fix it afterwards. So now I've fixed it. It looks pretty good. It actually starts looking like something. Now what you also probably noticed, obviously, is that it's completely white. And that's gonna be fixed later, so don't worry, just keep making these. So the next thing is, you don't have to do this to every lightning, but I recommend doing that to at least some. So we're gonna add a linear wipe effect. And now the wipe angle, you have this arrow, and just point it there, so it's gonna wipe from here. So that's how you know what direction you want it to. So in the beginning, you want it to come out of your actor, the lightning. So let's find the right direction. That looks pretty good. Then let's increase the wipe until it's, well, right there. Let's put the feather to 30. Then put keyframes on. Go forward like maybe 4 frames. How much you want, how slowly you want it to come out, and then put it to 0. So now, as you can see, it actually comes out and it looks really cool. And we can actually repeat this same thing to make it go out. So opposite direction. Let's go to the last frame, put the feather to 30 again. And in the last frame, let's find the very edge right there. Hit the stopwatch. Go back like 2 or 3 frames and put it to 0. So this right here is basically how you do one of these small lightning thingies. But now I'm gonna show a tip how to make it even more complex and cool. So let's actually duplicate this whole shape layer, and now let's go to the shape settings. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna delete all the keyframes from between and actually from the end. So I'm gonna completely change the path. It's gonna be one the same in here, and then it's gonna kind of split from here. So let's move it like that. Let's move it up from here, and then maybe even more forward from here. What we could do is even offset this with 2 frames. And then let's go to the last frame. Let's hide this previous one. Let's focus on this one only. Let's just fix the path, so basically just animate it. Now, it's kind of hard to explain, but basically what I did is I just duplicated this path that we previously made and just readjusted the path to go just a bit differently, but kind of start from the same spot, so it kind of splits and twists around in a really cool way. And then I also offsetted it with 2 frames in here, so it starts 2 frames later. And you don't have to do this with every lightning. Just repeat this same thing with the lines. What you can do is you can just duplicate this, delete the linear wipes because it wouldn't match this, and then also delete the shape, and then you can draw a new shape, and you can see that it already has the glow and turbulent displacement. So just keep drawing and animating the same kind of shapes all around. Now what I forgot to mention about these lines is remember to always put the blending mode to screen in these lightning strikes. So now, as you can see, I've added a lot of those same kind of lines, and now you can actually start to see that the effect is really starting to come together. One of those lines on its own doesn't look like much, but now it's starting to look like something. And it's basically the same exact thing with a little variation. So basically some of them are shorter, some of them I've actually enabled motion blur because it's like this really fast kind of thingy on the top happening. I saw something similar in the movie happening, so I kind of replicated that. After I've added all the small lightning that I want, there's just a few things I want to do before I pre-compose all of these layers. So basically here there's kind of this, I want there to be a point where they kind of connect, and I want to add like a bright hotspot in there, so I'm just gonna add a new adjustment layer. I want there to be a kind of bright spot flickering a little bit, and I want it to go bright right when the light hits, so here. So now we have this 4-frame adjustment layer. So I'm just gonna go to generate and add CC light rays. Then let's move the center point right there where I want the hotspot to be. I want there to be kind of a connection point. And then let's put the transfer mode to screen. Always use screen instead of add. If you use add, you will just ruin your effects. So let's change the radius to 20 and intensity to 400. Let's put keyframes on in the first frame. Now in the last frame I'm gonna put it to 200. So now we have this really quick bright spot right there. And later I'm gonna add sparks coming out of that. So that's kind of why I did it. I also want to make it flicker a little bit before. Now it's kind of starts a bit too smoothly. So I'm actually gonna duplicate this whole adjustment layer, take just 2 frames of it, go back like here, and let's change the settings in this one. And this time the intensity should be like 200, so it's not as much. So now when I did that, we have a little bit of flickering going on. It doesn't, I think it looks better like that. And basically, if you want the lightning to come in contact with something, like in here, I've done the exact same thing. So CC light rays just positioned right there. When you're completely done with the small lightning layers, before we move on to the big lightning, we're actually gonna pre-compose all of these, because there's a ton of layers. So let's pre-compose them and call them small lightning. And then let's put the blending mode to screen. Always remember that. So now that I'm completely done with the small lightning layers, now we're actually gonna move to the bigger lightning bolts. And we're gonna create them with advanced lightning. So let's add a new solid layer and call it lightning. Let's hide the layer so we can see. Let's find a point where we want it to start. About somewhere here. Then I want it to last until like somewhere here. So it's gonna be really long. Let's go ahead and add a advanced lightning. And let's just hide the small lightning layer, so this is gonna be easier to preview that way. There's a lot of tweaking in here that we're gonna do. Let's change the lightning type to strike. And let's also completely get rid of the forking. Let's put it to 0. Then in the expert settings, we're gonna put the complexity to 3. So make sure to put the direction end to your actor. You can see which one is the direction by looking at here and then moving it. So you can see the values change in here in the direction. And the other point out of screen. Let's also completely get rid of the glow in here. Let's put the opacity to 0, because the default glow in the advanced lightning looks really bad. So now let's just hit the stopwatch in direction and start animating it to follow your actor. So now what we can do is go to the first frame, then go to the last frame and just increase or decrease the conductivity state. This way we will have some movement in the lightning. And now sometimes this just happens. The lightning just jumps in a frame like that. And you kind of want to avoid that. So let's just do the whole thing again. Let's find a point here that looks cool. That looks pretty good. Then let's go to the last frame and maybe decrease it this time. And now I think it looks really good. The way it's curving up and then kind of back down again looks really good. So what we're gonna do next is basically the same thing we did for the other type of lightning. So we're just gonna add a turbulent displacement. And this first one again is gonna be some small detail. But this time we won't do it so much. Let's change it to bulge and put the amount to like 30. Looks good. So then click the turbulent displacement, take the offset thingy, keyframe the offset, and let's go to the last frame and move it outwards. So now we have the same flow that we did with the other lightning. And then let's add another turbulent displacement. And this time the size is 30 and the amount something like 40. Let's kind of see how that looks. Yeah, that looks pretty good, but let's just animate the evolution. So hit the stopwatch, go to the last frame and increase it maybe by like 1. So now it has some really slow movement in it. And the point where the lightning is attached to your actor doesn't have to be perfect, because it's gonna be covered by a bright spot later. I actually think that looks really good, especially in the end. Let's add some glow. And again we're gonna do the same thing. First one should be just a bit bigger than the core, then duplicate that. That should be something like 20 or 25 actually. Then duplicate that again and make it like 50. And then in these lightnings you can actually add a fourth glow, because these are supposed to be bright. And let's make it 100. So now it's starting to look like lightning. So let's just go to transition and add the linear wipe that we used previously too. So let's find the right direction. This is all basically the same thing as we did with the line, so I'm not gonna go too specific on how to use this. Let's find the point right there. Increase the feathering to like 60 or like actually fairly much. Something like that should be cool. It's starting to take a long time to preview. So now when the lightning goes out, we're actually not gonna use the linear wipe, but instead we're gonna use the decay in the advanced lightning. So that's why we put the direction to our actor, because the decay, it decays from the direction point like that. Enable decay main core, so otherwise it would only decay the forking, but when you enable that, it decays the main core. So now in the last frame we want the lightning to be kind of fully away from our actor, so that looks pretty good. Let's hit the stopwatch and go back like a lot, basically like 15 frames or something. We're actually not gonna put it to 0, we're gonna put it to 0.10. And now the reason we didn't put it to fully 0 is that it actually brings some depth when the lightning is thicker from here, because it's supposed to be closer to the camera, and then in there it's kind of a bit more thin. So that's a easy way to make it more dynamic. Now there's one cool thing left we're gonna do to this lightning bolt, and that's animate the core size. So when it starts coming out, I want it to be kind of more thin, so I want it to be 1.5. And then let's go to the point where we want it to get bright, which is right here. Let's put it to 3. Or you can even put it to 4 for a moment. Let's go actually back 2 frames and put it back to 1.5. So now it stays in 1.5 this whole time, and then in here it gets bright really quickly. And let's go forward a couple frames from the bright spot and put it to 3 because I don't want it to be 4 the whole time. So now a really cool way to make the lightning bolt look much more dynamic and better, which I really like to do with this, is to duplicate this whole thing, and then let's go to the second turbulent displacement, which is the bigger one, and let's get completely rid of it. So now you can kind of see what that did. The endpoint doesn't matter because it's gonna be covered, but yeah, you can kind of see what that did. It's kind of split apart in some spots. I'm also gonna get rid of the second glow in the duplicated layer. Now we can kind of see the effect better. So now we were gonna move on to the bright spot right there in my back where the lighting is connected. And we're gonna do that by just simply adding a new solid, white solid, and call it light. Let's hide it so we can see again. Let's just start it right when the lightning starts and end it when the lightning starts going away, so basically here. So now we're simply gonna take the pen tool and draw a mask around the area where the lightning is connected and animate it. So now you can see I have this weird shape in my back, and we're gonna make it into a bright light. So let's go to the mask settings, put the mask feather to kind of a lot, but until make sure it's still solid white from the middle. 25 is probably in this case. So then let's duplicate this mask, and then let's put the mask expansion in the other layer to 20, and then the feather to 50. Also remember to put this light layer to screen. Let's duplicate that mask again, and then let's put the feather to 100 and the expansion to 25. Now these settings may not be in your same in your shot. It's really hard to make look good, but something like this, the idea is that you keep just feathering and increasing the size until it looks like a light. Then in this one let's put the mask feather to like 200 and the expansion to 40. Then duplicate it again. Now let's put it to maybe 300, the expansion to 50. You can kind of see what we're going for. Let's add a sixth mask, put it to 500 and the expansion to 100. Now after I've done that, I can actually see how that looks and start doing some adjustments. I think the core is a bit too harsh. I'm just gonna go to the second mask, feather it a bit more. Then in the first mask I'm gonna feather that bit more too, so 30. You really have to kind of look and see what looks good. Now we can also add another bright spot somewhere here. Let's just duplicate this white light layer and make it start like before the lightning starts detaching from the actor. And of course let's delete all the masks. Then let's create a new mask somewhere like here. And then let's feather it way up until we don't see much solid white. Maybe something like this, that looks pretty good. And then let's do the same thing with this. Let's duplicate that mask and then put the wet feathering way up so it creates even more light, something like that. And then let's go to the transform and opacity and then make it kind of fade in and fade out. So the first frame, put the opacity to like 20. Let's go to the middle, put it to 100. I want this layer to actually last longer until somewhere like here. And there let's put it to 10 again. Now we have this cool bright area in here. So that's pretty much all the lightning stuff. Now you know how to do this bigger lightning and the smaller lightning. So just do a couple of these big lightning bolts. Now that you're done with your big lightning bolts, as you can see I only needed 2. Pre-compose these. Let's name it lightning. Now basically the whole lightning part is done. So let's just hide these lightning layers because, well, my computer would explode otherwise, and it's easier to preview like that. And you can see what's happening better. So we're actually gonna move on to sparks And I'm gonna show how to make spark hits right inside After Effects. Let's create a new solid and call it sparks. And the first sparks, here we actually do need the small lightning because the first sparks are gonna start in the bright spot that we added previously. Let's just find the spot. So basically right here. So that's where we wanted them to start, and they're gonna last until the end. So this is where we want them to start. Let's put the layer back on. Let's go to generate, then let's go to simulation and add CC particle world. Now this is a cool particle tool that you can create spark hits with. And there's a lot of settings we're gonna tweak here. Change the particle type to faded sphere. Let's change all the colors to white. We're gonna adjust the colors later, but for now let's put them to white. Let's also put the max opacity to 100, and as you can see they're way too big. So let's change the birth size to 0.04 and then the depth size to 0.02. Now you can see they're barely visible, but that's gonna be fixed later. Let's go to the opacity map. This is basically, this right here, the dark area, is how they fade out. So you can see that the opacity is 100% and it fades out in here. So let's just adjust that so they fade out more smoothly like that. Then let's go to physics and change the mode to viscose. Then we can start putting it to the right position. So now it's actually creating those sparks all the time in every frame. So to create a spark hit, we're gonna go to the birth rate settings and keyframe that. So let's hit keyframes on. In the very first frame, let's put it to 0. Let's go 1 frame forward, put it to way up, then 1 frame forward again and way down. So now it only spawns the sparks in this single frame and no more. So it's a single spark hit. And this is really taking a long time to preview. So as you can see, they still don't look anything like sparks. They don't look anything how we want them to. So let's go to Effect, Stylize and add a glow. And let's not do anything with the first glow except put the size to 8. Let's duplicate the glow, put the size to 15. Then let's turn on the motion blur. Make sure to have them turned on in the comp and the layer. So now you can see they actually look like sparks, but I think they're exploding way too hard. And to fix that, just go to the velocity. If you would put the velocity to 0, the sparks would literally fall down, and if you would max them out, they would explode really hard. So let's just decrease it a little bit. It should be kind of an explosion, but not so hard. That's pretty much how I want it to look. Now this red circle here is the area where the sparks kind of come in. You can also change the size of that. I want to make it a bit smaller, give it a bit different shape, something like that. So now you can see we have some spark action going on. And now we're gonna fix the color. So let's go to the particle and start playing with the color. So in the beginning you want them to be almost completely white, kind of orangey, and then the depth color should be orangey red, something like that. Now as you can see, after the coloring they look really bad, and that's because the layer is not in screen mode. So let's put it to screen mode. Now it looks a lot better. The good thing about these sparks is that because they're actually generated right inside After Effects, you can slow them down as much as you want. You have an infinite amount of frames. So that's what's cool about these. We can just go to time stretch and put it to something like 400, which makes it 4 times longer. So it's really slowed down. If you want to make your sparks go out faster, you can go to the longevity settings and just decrease that or increase that. That's just how long the sparks are gonna be on the screen. As you can see here, they're already gone. So after you're done with one spark hit, you can just duplicate the layer and then move it to another spot. For example, here we did a spark hit in there too. So you can just duplicate it and move the layer there. And now you don't have to do all the same adjustments again. And if you want, you can just find the frame where the birth rate is at the maximum and then reduce it or increase it if you want less or more sparks emitting from that area. That needs to be smaller. These sparks are also 3D, so you can rotate them in 3D space. So that's how you can do some easy slow motion sparks for your flash effects. So as I said earlier, now we're gonna add some color to the lightning. But before that, I'm just gonna pre-compose the spark layers. just like we did with the lightning. Then remember to put them back to screen mode. Now before I do anything, I'm gonna hide the spark layer because it takes forever to preview. But basically what we're gonna do is first we're gonna give some color to the small lightning layer. So we'll just duplicate that whole layer, go to color correction and add a tint. And then just pick the blue color. At this point you could make them any color, even yellow like that. But of course we're gonna pick the blue color, something like that. If you wanna add even more glow, you could duplicate this layer again with the tint color, then go to blur and sharpen and add a fast box blur and set it to something about 60. You could also make the color a bit darker blue, makes it look cool. Then also maybe put down the opacity because you don't want it to be too strong. And now you can see we have a nice blue colored lightning. And then just do the same exact thing to the bigger lightning layers. Now we're gonna add Rgb displacement to all of the spark and lightning effects. So we're gonna do another pre-composition. So we're gonna pre-compose all of these effect layers, all the lightning layers and all the spark layers, which are already pre-compositions. So let's pre-compose them and call them effects. And now at this point, if your computer is a toaster like mine is, you will probably take forever to preview. Also, let's not forget to put it to blending mode to screen. So, if your computer is a toaster like mine is, what you can actually do is open this composition. So you basically have only all the effects in here. If you look at here, you have all the lightning and spark layers. And then you can actually already render these out as a footage layer and then bring it back into the main comp. And that really makes running the After Effects much easier. So that's what I'm gonna do, but you don't have to do that if you're running this just fine. You can keep it as a one pre-composition in this main comp. But I'm gonna render this out. So now I've exported the whole layer, and as you can see I have the footage layer right here, looks pretty cool. And now I'm just gonna delete the effects pre-composition and bring in the effects layer. And I don't have to do anything but put the layer back to screen mode. And now previewing this is gonna be so much easier, and everything is gonna be so much easier going forward. So as I said, now we're gonna get into the Rgb displacement. So at first we're of course gonna do the exact same thing as we did with the footage displacement, and that is that we're gonna go to channel and add arithmetic, put it to max, and then max out the values. So we're gonna have 3 layers. We're gonna max out these, same thing as we did previously, and then in the third one max out red. So the exact same thing as we did previously. We have the layers in separate channels. So now we're gonna displace them a bit differently. So what we're gonna do is go to the middle channel, add optics compensation, enable reverse lens distortion, put it to 12. Then let's add the same to the bottom one, which is the blue value. Again, reverse lens distortion, and then let's put it to 20. And now you can see towards the corners you have this cool rainbow effect going on. So the next thing we're gonna make is kind of a displacement trail for the running, so that everything I move past it leaves kind of a displacement tunnel. So let's just turn off all the lightning layers and see where we want the trail to start. So right here, and let's add a new adjustment layer and make it start there, and make sure to put it above everything. So then let's draw a mask. We want to start with a thin mask attached to your actor's back, something like that. Then of course let's go to the mask settings and put keyframes on, and then we're gonna animate it in such a way where we're not gonna do anything to this side. We're gonna leave it completely still, then just go forward and start adjusting this attached to your actor's back again. So it's basically just a trail. So when the mask's done, let's add the good old Turbulent Displacement, and of course do some tweaking here. Also wanna put some feather to the mask, maybe 20, and then let's tweak the settings. The Turbulent Displacement should be set to bulge, and then the amount can be much less. It doesn't need to be strong. Then of course let's put keyframes on in the evolution, go to the last frame, increase it to something about 2 full circles, so it has some movement in it. Then, to add even more detail, let's duplicate this turbulent displacement, but this time put the size much smaller. You could also change the mode to turbulent. It doesn't really matter that much at this point. So now let's add another adjustment layer. Let's turn the lightning on, and we want it to start right when the bright light hits, which is right here. Now we can turn the lightning back off, so we can preview more easily. We're gonna draw a mask again, but this time we're gonna draw a rough mask around the actor. Something like this, just a shape. And then, as you probably guessed, we're gonna animate it to follow the actor. So your mask should look something like this. Just a rough shape following. So let's have this mask at subtract mode. Then let's go to blur and sharpen and add CC radial fast blur. Let's leave it at the center, but let's set it to brightest. So then you want to put the amount to something like 6. So it's pretty subtle, but it still does something. And then also remember to put the mask feather way up to something like over 100. So now once again we're gonna add another adjustment layer, and let's again turn the lightning on and make it start right when the big flash starts. But this time we're not gonna draw any kind of mask in here. So what we're gonna do to this layer, we're gonna go to color correction and add a photo filter. Let's set it to custom and choose a nice blue color that we want. And the amount should be something like 50. And make sure to have the preserve luminosity on, otherwise it will just diffuse the highlights. We don't want that. What we're also gonna add to this adjustment layer is a little bit more distortion. Let's add a turbulent displacement. Set it to bulge. Let's put the size to something like 20. Then the amount should be like 10. So we want it to be really subtle, so it's barely visible, but you can see some ripples if you look something that should be a straight line. This just blends everything together just a bit more. And of course let's put keyframes on in the evolution in the first frame. Go to the last frame and increase it by... You're just gonna want it to move slowly. I think a little bit over 1 is pretty good for my shot. So all these previous adjustment layers with the displacement and stuff should be above everything. And now we're gonna add a new adjustment layer, but this time it's gonna be only above the footage, because we want to do adjustment to the footage only. And you want to make it start, if you remember I made it flicker a little bit right here, as you can see. I'm gonna start it right there. And with this adjustment layer, we're gonna do some exposure adjustment to the footage. And this is something where the real light really comes in handy, because when you lift the exposure, it actually looks believable. So let's just go to color correction and add exposure. So what we're gonna do now is basically just kind of think logically how bright it should be and what looks good. For example, right here, because I want it to flicker really quickly, I'm gonna put it to 1 for that 1 frame, then back to 0. Of course, use keyframes. So then here, when it cuts to the bright light, I'm gonna put a keyframe before that, then put the exposure in the footage to 1. You can see, without and with the exposure, it blends everything together. Then let's go forward a little bit. There's no really right way to do this part. You just kinda have to see what looks good. I'm gonna go a couple frames forward in that and put it to 0.5. Then, when the really bright lightning comes, I'm gonna go to the frames before the bright lightning, put it to 0 so it goes a little bit less bright for a moment. Then I'm gonna go forward, find the brightest spot. And now again in here, you can see everything is really bright. There's a bright light coming from this corner. And then now, if we put the exposure to 1, it looks so much more believable. So that's kind of the idea. You kind of want to match the exposure with the lightning. After the exposure adjustments, you can really see how much better the effects look. The lightning looks, especially in this part, when the bright light is in the corner, just like the actual light in the scene was. It looks so much more believable than it did like this. You can see the difference. What we're also gonna do to the footage is let's add a photo filter. Let's again make it custom and choose a blue color. And now this time we are actually gonna disable the preserve luminosity. This will make the lightning pop just a bit more, and we want to put it to 15. We don't want it to be that strong. I found this small dust particle layer in Google image search. So one final thing you can do is overlay this to your footage. Put it below the layer with the photo filter and turbulent displacement. And of course make it start when the bright light starts here. Make it start in this frame. Then because this layer is huge, as you can see, let's scale it down and put the blending mode to screen. And they're way too strong at first. Let's just put down the opacity. Let's put it to something like 20. That probably looks pretty good. So that right there is pretty much it for the effect. Now this was a huge tutorial to make, and it took a long time to make. I recorded this in like 4 different days, I think, and took a lot of time to also edit. So yeah, I hope this was useful in at least some level. And yeah, if you want me to make some other tutorials and stuff, you can comment down below of what you would like to see me do. So yeah, we'll see you in another tutorial, maybe. Thanks for watching.